Okay, good. So we go to PowerPoint. Go to PowerPoint and start running it. Perfect. Excellent.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the 36th Annual RISE Conference. My name is Jorge Estrella. I'm representing the Foreign University, the Professional Development Resource Center. I welcome you to our webinar, and I want to introduce my colleague, Teresa Anderson, who is going to give you more details about this session.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. This is a wonderful opportunity, a first virtual conference, and I'm very honored to introduce our speaker today, Vincenza Ferrantelli, who's been teaching special ed since 1982. She teaches graduate level special ed classes and supervises first-year teachers pursuing a license in special education. So I'm honored to present Vincenza today. And Vincenza, you're on.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Welcome. So for this presentation, what we're going to look at our goals, aside from working with students remotely, but we're also going to discuss a bit about blended learning, because I think that today's environment has a bit of both. So let's take a look at some of the goals for today. So our goals today are going to be to explore and discuss challenges and best practices when providing instruction online and or in a blended environment. I know that this has been a challenging time for all educators. This in the spring, we sort of dove in onto online instruction with little or no preparation. Now that we've gotten our feet wet a bit, we can maybe begin to look at what has worked and what hasn't worked. And those are some of the things that I'd like us to begin to discuss. So, and also, of course, we're going to discuss the importance of planning to prepare for online work for students receiving special education services, because planning is key, and it's key for any environment. And then, of course, we're going to look at some strategies. We're going to share those strategies and techniques to develop a positive classroom environment online or in a blended environment. It's a little different when we're in the classroom and we have our own routines and procedures as opposed to what's happening online. Students are at home. They may be, and possibly when they come back into the classroom, we want them to feel comfortable, of course, at all times. And we want them to succeed online or in a blended environment. So those are the goals for today. So let's take a look at remote learning. And I want you to think about your present teaching experience. And let's think about what it feels like at this point to be teaching online or remotely. So I want you to select some words that best describe your experience working remotely with students receiving special education services. We're going to use Mentimeter to do that. So I want you, in the meantime, start thinking about that, and I'll put that screen up for us. Here we go. So we have presenting. So what I'd like you to do is to go to www.mentimeter.com and use the code menti.com, and use the code that's on the screen and select some words that best describe your experience working remotely with students receiving special education services. And we can share that during this presentation. As you type in your words will come up. You can also do this on your phone. If you're not at a computer, just go to menti.com and use the code that's on the screen. I mean, for me, when we first started this, for me, I just thought, oh my goodness, how are we going to do this with special education students? So the words that I came up was impossible, or just challenging, or very difficult. So I don't know what you're thinking. Oh, here we go. Creativity, overwhelming, challenging, absolutely. Time consuming, especially, yes. It's difficult. Creativity. It can be rewarding, overwhelming, impossible. Patience, unpredictable, frustrating, empathy, teaching growth. These are wonderful, wonderful words. Absolutely. I think they truly describe how it feels right now and how it has felt last spring. So absolutely, this is a time where our kids are overwhelmed and we are overwhelmed. And we need to find ways to try to feel a little bit more comfortable when we're working with our students, especially students who are special education students. So let's move on, because this is exactly, I think, how everyone is feeling at this point. So let me just get to the next piece. Hold on one second. So we're going to move into the next screen. And thank you for sharing that information. Here we go. And so we'll move on to the next slide. So we're gonna use it one more time, Mentimeter, only this time, since we've gotten our feet wet a bit. Let's see what has worked, because I'm sure that many of us have done things that are working quite well for our students. And so let's share that, especially since, you know, we're navigating different sites, we're looking at apps, we're trying different techniques. Let's see what is working for you. So I'm going to go to that site. And once again, I'd like you to use Mentimeter to share what's working for you at this point. I'm going to put that up for you in a second. Again, I think it's gone. So as you're thinking, let's put this up. Okay, let's bring this screen over. Here we go. And here we go. So let's share our best practices. What is working for you? I know that for some of my teachers, finding different apps to engage our students, using different links so that students can visually see and experience some of those sites, like for mathematics or for science or for English. So what's working for you? Remember to go to menti.com and then put in the code. Because when we think about this question, I mean, who better to tell us what works than the teachers who are there? Absolutely. Live instruction, verbal evaluations, interactive websites. And live instructions is extremely important. Students need to see us. They need to see that we are there for them, that they not only see us in class, if we do have class, but they need to see us live and online. Behavior plans, absolutely. Many of our students, unfortunately, do have and exhibit some behaviors when they're working remotely and in class. So if we have strategies that do work, it's great if we can share that with parents. Breathing exercises, we have to think of wellness. This is a very difficult time for our students and for us and their parents. So taking the time to step back a little bit when we're teaching and to just ask students to exercise or to breathe a little bit or to do a dance and put on some music, and just for ourselves to be a little bit more flexible. And always being prepared before meetings. I really like what you guys are putting up, because this is absolutely true. Being prepared before meetings with students and ensuring that they have all the materials they need. And that comes in with planning and preparation. That's something we're going to talk about a little later, which is absolutely important, because you can have a fantastic lesson plan, but if the students don't have the material and they don't have access to anything, then that lesson's not going to go. And that lesson's not going to go whether you're in class or online. It's not going to matter. And of course, lots of communication. We want to build an environment where our students feel comfortable. We want to be able to communicate with parents. Remember, we're trying to build a culture where our students feel comfortable and non-threatening. So a positive environment, that's absolutely key for our kids. Enthusiasm and animation. Always to be enthusiastic about the work that we do. That's just what our profession, if you love teaching, you're going to be totally enthused about what we're doing. Organization and flexibility. I think those are really key, especially when you're working online and in a blended environment, or one or the other. It's just right now overwhelming, so it's important to be organized, to know exactly what it is you want to do, how you want to execute that particular lesson, what it will look like for the students when they're online, and how are they going to access certain lessons. And of course, also for parents. It's also, I have one person here says, I think it's best to call on all the students online so they feel important. Absolutely. We want students to know that we know they're there. So calling on students individually, just making it equal for everybody so everybody gets the opportunity to speak. Thank you, Jessica. That's really very important. Also to call and to speak to parents, and making sure that parents know how to navigate the sites that we're asking students to work on. Group discussions, absolutely. I mean, there are times when we present something and we have to remember that our kids are going to struggle. And if we keep that in mind, we may need to create smaller groups. And one way to do that with our students, of course, is to have time, aside from the time that we're on virtually with them as a class, but maybe to meet separately in smaller groups to provide that academic support, or possibly working one-on-one to provide added support. Let's not forget that if we do have paras, we can also employ their assistance to work with our students online and to work with parents. FaceTime, of course, is very important, and it's difficult. You know, someone said before, it's overwhelming, it's difficult. Absolutely. We also have families and we have children, and in order to find the time to do this, and that's why organization is key. So having FaceTime and that one-on-one with students is very important, and pacing. Of course, we can't overwhelm students with everything. So sometimes we have to be flexible enough to take a step back and say, well, you know, what's really important here? What do I need to present? And how should I present this so that our students can maximize on what we want them to do and be able to move forward? Thank you very much. These are great ideas, and let's move on. Let's see. 1 second, let me just share my screen with you. One more. Okay. Oh, too far. Here we go. Okay, so now with everything that's wonderful and that we know works, of course there are challenges. So we're going to use Padlet instead at this point, and we're going to look at what's not working, and maybe we can discuss that a little bit. So I want you to start thinking about what's not working, and we're going to put that up on Padlet. 1 second. I'm going to share that with you in a moment. Here we go. One second. It's challenging. It's this one. Click on the link for you. Can you see this one? I hope that you can.
Copy link.
I copy the link and I'm trying to put it here. Oh, here we go. This we're all learning. Here we go. Okay, so I hope that you can see that now. Here we go. So I'd like you to identify what has been most challenging working with our students remotely or in a blended environment. I know that for some of my teachers, behavior has been an issue. We have spoken about that because they're online, behavior tends to be something that they have difficulty with. Sometimes lack of parental support.
Oh, we got somebody's.
Oh, engaging. Students do not attend regularly. Absolutely. These are definitely some things that are an issue. Reporting technical difficulties, student participation, engaging middle school students, and engaging all students equally, student participation. I hope that, some of the things that we mentioned before that were working, that may help you now with some of the things that you're finding somewhat difficult. For example, if you're finding that students are not as engaged, it may be time then to set time aside for some students and to work with them separately and not as a group. That might be a way to work with that. If they cannot access the site or they're having difficulty, if parents are reporting that they're having difficulty using the online platform that you are using, you may need to set time aside to just work with parents and help them navigate the site. So think about that too. If students do not attend regularly or leave during a session, it's okay to cold call on students and then maybe create little quizzes in between so that you're holding them responsible for their work. So they have to answer questions. So now they know that at that point, you're going to put something up that they have to answer, much like what we're doing right now. Keeping students on track with their gen ed assignments. Absolutely, that is difficult. So for something like that, if you're working in an environment where you are working with a gen ed teacher, so collaboration between the two of you is very important so that possibly you can get the work that that person is working on ahead of time. And so that now you can provide some assistance for your students so they can move forward in those classes. And of course, you can do that by working with them separately. So these are all viable challenges, absolutely. And it's very difficult, especially when you're doing it online. I know that when I was a teacher working with my students, and especially if they had some gen ed classes, and I was working with them, let's say in a resource room setting, in a SETS type program, that's what I did. I mean, I really reached out to the gen ed and I tried to find out what they were doing so that I could work one-on-one. And of course, working remotely is a different ballgame, so it makes it all that much more difficult. But all the more reason why you should try to really work closely with the gen ed population. Okay, so let's move on. I'm just going to share my screen with you. PowerPoint one more time. Here we go, just moving. Okay, so let's move on. All right, so we talked a lot about planning. And if you take a look, some of the things that you're talking about when trying to get students engaged more or trying to get students to work a little bit more with or having difficulty with the gen ed curriculum or getting them to navigate the sites, we're talking about planning and preparation. ahead of time, we need to really know who our students are. Keep in mind the students who are going to struggle when you're developing your plan. Think of the fact that since we don't know what's going on in the home at times, there could be reasons why they're not engaged online. So try to be as sensitive as possible to that. Be flexible enough to change things up for students. Some students may have difficulty because they are not accustomed to online work. Just because students today, they play with their phones and they play games and so forth, it doesn't mean that they can navigate an academic type site. So, and that's something that we have to teach them also. And maybe their parents don't know how. When we're talking about students with special needs, we're talking about a variety of levels of students. There are students who really need the added support, almost hand to hand, hands-on, whereas you have other students who may not need as much support and can navigate a little bit more easily. So it's really from one end to the other when we're thinking about our students. So it's really important to know who our students are. And then to know who our students are, read their IEPs. I don't know how many of you have access to that. I hope that you do, and you should. Read their IEPs, and then in order to write these clear objectives and instruction for your students. And it should always be based on their readiness levels, because if we're providing work that is above their heads, you're going to lose the students. So keep that in mind, especially if it's done remotely and the students don't have that assistance. So, but if you're in a blended environment, maybe when the students come to you at that time, that's when you should introduce the actual lesson. And then when they're online, that's where the reinforcement and the enrichment might come in. And then when you're creating those activities that align to the lesson themselves, remember, let's try to make them as fun and engaging as possible by using a variety of apps and links. Like some of my teachers are using PairShare. You can use Padlet and Mentimeter and so many others. Flow vocabulary for reading and writing. And of course, differentiation. Let's not forget, we need to differentiate instruction for the students. So you can't have this one way of doing it for everybody. So think about who your students are and build in those supports. Some students are a little bit more visual, so we may need to provide more pictures. Use apps that are interactive. Think about also assessment that needs to also be differentiated to a certain degree. And formative assessment goes on all day long. So, when you're working with students, so think about it's constantly ongoing. So you're doing do-nows and exit tickets, questions and answers. This is a nice time for kids to do some journal writing that they can sort of put down on paper how they're feeling about not only what's going on around them, but also the lessons themselves that they're learning, and they can share that with you. So when we're thinking of lesson planning, of course, we have our measurable objectives, and we want kids to identify, and we want kids to do so that they are measurable. We want kids to explain, we want kids to discuss, we want students to show us that they can solve and they can write and they can read. So when we're thinking of Bloom's taxonomy, it's about having students do something that we can see and that we can measure. Materials. That's very important also. It's extremely important if students are working online. If you're creating a particular lesson and you have a particular objective in mind, make sure that the students have the materials in order to plan this out. And if they're at home, think about the type of activities or materials that they can use around the house in order to move on with the lesson. Or they can be provided in class before they go remotely the next week. And then, of course, you have the gradual release of instruction. Remember to model everything for your student. Just to put up a link and say this is about math or this is about science, take a look at it, and now they're expected to know. That's not enough. We do need to create some mini lessons possibly and show them exactly how something should be done. So you could do that through PowerPoints. And then, of course, you do it together remotely, and then they do it on their own. And that's where the assessment comes in, where students you can then see how they're progressing. And then, of course, like we said before, differentiate, provide those supports that are necessary. And then, of course, if you have paras, as we said, they can also help to provide instruction. Take a look at those IEPs, make your lessons as scripted as possible. And that will help guide your lessons. Because if you have all this, we talked about organization, this helps to keep you organized so that you know how you're moving forward. And then, of course, for parents, it's a different ballgame. This is just a sample. I'm not going to read this, obviously, but this is a step-by-step for parents. That lesson plan that you created, that doesn't work for parents. So you can't put that up online. But maybe you can provide them with a step-by-step. This is what you should do first. This is the stuff that you need. Your students have it. These are the activities. And then, of course, provide them with the materials. And then if you're giving them a link, give them the questions that they should ask their children and provide them with the answers as well. And then of course, an activity to assess at the end. So a step-by-step for parents, and you can make this as simple as you need to make it. And in order to build that parental relationship, because that's extremely important at this point. Parents are the backbone right now. We need them to really help our students when they're online. So make sure that in the beginning and especially in the beginning, that you're introducing yourself. Introduce your goals and emphasize the importance of how important they are in order to help you and to help the students. And then, of course, reach out to parents to thank them. Don't just give them work to do. These parents are overwhelmed. People are working. We don't know what's going on in their homes or where they are. So reach out to parents and thank them for their support and their teamwork, because that's what we need right now. It is a team effort. Celebrate students' effort and their hard work. Let them know that they're doing well. Let them know that what they've done, you appreciate, and that, yes, they're doing fine. And be flexible. Think about celebrating and show it to them online or when they come to class. Walk parents through the online platform you're using. Some of you said that some parents really don't know how to navigate. So yes, we have to show them how to navigate the site. We can't just say we're using Dojo or we're using Google Classroom or whatever you're using, and this is the work, and have your students do this, because parents don't know. So show them how to navigate the site. And then, of course, you want to also show the students. Put up schedules for the students, and also schedule sessions with students on how to navigate. And then provide support throughout the academic year. It's not, you don't just do it once, these letters. These letters should, continue throughout. And then, of course, set time aside for small group or one-on-one support. This works very well, the small group or the one-on-one online. My teachers have been doing this, and they find this to be something that really works for them, to set the time aside and to get online with either one of them on a Monday, on a Tuesday, a smaller group, or what have you, just to go over what the work is and then to provide that added support. So at this point, this also helps to create a positive classroom environment. What are you doing at this point to help create a positive classroom environment? So we're going to go back to Padlet, and I'm going to ask you to think about while I put that up for you. Here we go. Share. Here we go. Okay. Positive feedback is extremely important for our students and for all students. involving students in making the rules, that always seems to work quite nicely. Because now the rules are theirs, and they're accountable. Creating a class pledge that's written out so students can see it. That helps team and community building, absolutely. High expectations for students and teachers. Lots of compliments in front of others and personally. Student discussions and interactions. Modeling. Yes, students have had little interaction over the last 6 to 8 months and need some social interaction. Absolutely. Have a fun activity that allows them to interact in a non-academic activity with virtual students. Positive reinforcement, high expectations. Positive feedback. Absolutely. These are all excellent ways to create a positive classroom environment. Absolutely. We need to, when students hand something in or they post it online, we begin to always with the positives first. And then we pick one thing if we need to and make a suggestion. And then also provide an example. And that always helps our students. See, people are still posting, so let's see what it says here. High energy and positive reinforcement. Engaging material, absolutely. If you're able to engage your students, then they're with you, and they feel that that it's fun, and that they also, when you're asking students to make up the rules, that's works very well. So in a positive classroom environment, you're holding students accountable for their behavior. Because online, many times students have difficulty. And sometimes we may see our students act out a bit, or that they don't want to be online because it may be difficult, or maybe they're bored, or maybe the attention is not there to stay the full time. So these are the things that we need to be aware of when we're working with our students. So yes, providing praise for effort is important. If you're using some sort of PBIS system, positive behavior modification type of program, then you need to introduce it to the parents so that they can also reinforce it at home. So what works, what you're using that works, share those strategies with parents so that they can also work with their children. Other things, of course, we talked a little bit about wellness. You're right, we need to create some fun activities for students. It's not always about academics. So there are times when you want to have like a meet and greet in the morning, where you're just getting together to find out how everybody's feeling, what's going on with them, how you're feeling. You want to share that too. This morning I feel fantastic. The sun is shining. How do you feel today? And let them be able to share that with you and with their peers. So before you even get involved in some of the academics. Remember, social emotional learning. These are really important things for our students right now because they're experiencing what we're experiencing. This is a difficult time. Yes, morning meeting, absolutely. Times during the lesson itself, you might find that some of the students are not with you. So stop the lesson, because otherwise you're teaching to no one. Stop the lesson and do a little exercise, or get kids to share some of their ideas with you at that point, and have them move around. I remember seeing one class where the students were sitting there, and this was during the blended time. So one of my teachers took a video, and I'm watching, and they just didn't have the attention span to stay that long. So it's okay. So she stopped the lesson, which was wonderful, and they just exercised a bit, or they just shared how they were feeling. They had a little reward session at that point, and then they went back. So now she re-engaged them. So that's a nice way to also do it. Let me see what else is up here. So fun activities, of course, engaging materials. Yes, this is all great. So now we're going to move on. Thank you for sharing that. Just going to show you my PowerPoint. Okay, so move on. All right, so creating a positive classroom culture based on what you've all said, of course, those were all fantastic. And of course, organization, like we talked about before, managing routines and procedures. Keep it simple. Don't overthink this area too much. I mean, we're not mimicking the classroom exactly, so let's be a little bit more flexible. Make sure that whatever you put up is manageable for students. And our students are very routine oriented, so it's important to keep that in mind, that if you do something a certain way in the classroom, try to do that particular task the same way. That tends to help some of our students. Be visible, maintain an online presence. Be there for your kids. It's not just during that time. Some of my students, when they can't get online, my teachers, with their students, they'll ask their students to call them on the phone or to text them. Of course, with parental and school permission, they'll do that. And so what you're doing with maintaining your online presence, the students see you. They're used to you. They know what your expectations are for them. Positive behavior support where feedback is friendly and warm. And that's exactly what we just spoke about and some of you shared. Positive tone in verbal and written feedback.
For the interruption, you have to change to the PowerPoint. Or you are in the PowerPoint?
Yeah,
Yeah.
she's on.
Oh, you don't see the PowerPoint?
Yes, I see it. I see it.
Okay, so a positive tone in verbal and written feedback. Keep that in mind. We don't want to turn our students off at any time. Consistently post materials, schedules, and agendas online to manage routines and procedures. And this is not just for the students, but for the parents. For students who can, high school students, maybe middle school students, who may be able to navigate these schedules and so forth, that's fine. But then we have younger students, of course, and this is more for the parents, so the parents know what's going on. Address social emotional learning. And we talked a little bit about that, about students expressing how they feel, maybe during that meet and greet time. And this can be done in various ways. You could use emojis to do this. You can make it as visual as you want. If it's all online and you don't have that too, and students are more hands-on, students can create these with paper plates and crayons and popsicle sticks, and they can actually lift them up and show them to you. You can even do a fist for five. How many of you feel that you understand the work? Show me five, and then they can show you five. You don't understand the work, or thumbs up, thumbs down. We're just trying to gauge how the students are feeling and be as flexible as possible with this. So mood meters, meet and greet, wellness type activities, thumbs up, fist for five, checklists to self-assess. That is something, we want our students to be able to self-regulate eventually. If your students are at that level, that's great. If they're not, we want to move them in that direction so that we do have these high expectations for them. Make lessons relevant to learners' interests, family traditions, and or personal experiences. Think about what your kids are interested in and embed that into your lessons. If students are really into, let's say, animals, and then you could do a lesson on that, or bring in books that have, or readings that have to do with students' interests. Okay, we're going to look at student engagement. If you're using Padlet one more time, how are you engaging students online? So think about that in class. How are you doing that? So I'm just going to copy the link. Here we go. Okay, what's that? Oh, Oh, that's not the picture I have up, but okay. You should see a gray screen.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah.
All right. So how are you engaging students online or in class? Let's share what you guys are doing so we can all learn from you. Sometimes, remember, our students are not as engaged. So what can we do? So some of my teachers are using Pear Deck, and they find that Pear Deck is an app that's they could use with students with a variety of abilities, because they can actually drag and move over their responses. So that tends to work quite well for some of students who are a little bit more.
Vincenzo, I'm sorry to interrupt, but they're saying that they can't, nothing's coming up on the screen for the Padlet. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Let's see.
No, you have to allow people to add to it.
Yeah, and there's quite a few who said that it's it opens, but they can't type on it.
Oh, okay.
I know they were able to do it before, but this one
Yeah.
isn't working.
So why don't we use the chat instead?
Yeah. Okay.
That's fine. We could use the chat instead. So I'm going to remove this so we can use the chat. So let me put my PowerPoint back up. Oh, hold on. Here we go. So instead of using Padlet, we're using the chat. So as I said, some of my teachers are using Pear Deck, and they find that to be something that's working very well for them. Hi, Eugene. You're doing a lot of cold calling and sharing interactive slides with them? Yes, absolutely. Definitely cold call on students, because you want them to know that you know they're there and you hold them responsible for their attendance. Nearpod, absolutely. Some of my teachers are also using that, and they find that to be quite engaging. Hands-on activities, that's always helpful, especially when they're in class with you. That is a lot more doable at that time. Group work. Right now, group work seems to be a little bit more challenging, but you can definitely do that online too, where you're just selecting maybe 3 students and you meet with them privately as a group. You can do that online, absolutely. High interest topics, yes. You know, whenever you're using things that students are interested in or that's going on in the world and they're a little older, that tends to be something that you can always engage them with. Right, asking questions that they don't have to worry about getting a right or wrong answer. Modeling in class, absolutely. If you show them how to do something, and then of course you can always put, create an anchor chart where students can use it as a reference, and then they can work on their own. Think, pair, share. Yes, those are definitely activities where you give children a chance to think about it first, so they process the information or the question itself, and then they can come together with another partner and they can share. Today, of course, everything is at a distance. using Post-it to make interactive video lessons. That's great. That tracks students' participation in multiple choice, and the tree response questions when I periodically pause videos. That's from Michael. Thank you, absolutely. Lots of great ideas. Thank you for sharing this for everybody. Vocabulary review. Games such as Kahoot, absolutely. Quizlet. GymKit, absolutely. Thank you, very nice. So let's go on. And aside from all these wonderful ideas that everyone has had, there are other ways to also engage our students by using visual schedules. So to make sure students understand what's happening at this point, what's going to happen afterwards. Remember, some of our students might be at a little bit more challenging for them, some of the work. So we may have to provide some visual schedules for them. Timers, if there are behavior issues going on, just to remind them that yes, this is the time that we're doing this, and you might have to set a timer. This helps with behavior. And then if and then cards, some sort of reward system for students so that you can keep them on task at all times, especially in the classroom, especially if you have students with some behavior issues. And modeling, as someone else has said, always model. If you have a project, you want to provide students with a sample of it ahead of time so they can see what it is and what it should look like, and then steps on how to navigate that project, and actually doing it in class to show them what it should look like and what the steps are, and then giving them not only the sample, but the steps themselves. And then, of course, they can create that particular project. And also build an interest. Give students choice. Let them decide what type of project they want to do, or how they're going to demonstrate the knowledge of a particular concept that you taught. Not everyone can demonstrate their knowledge in the same way. Fun time, absolutely. Definitely is a little bit of time for kids to have some fun. And as many of you mentioned, the different apps and sites to work with that students are familiar with and can enjoy. So we have here the Pear Deck, Padlet, vocabulary, videos, etc. Screen time set aside to support parents and discuss expectations. I say this a lot because it's really important at this time. Keep in mind, parents and our teachers encourage parents to not do the work for their students. And I know this is a little difficult because no parent wants their child not to succeed. So this is really important. And that's why we try to always encourage and praise effort, so that children do not feel like their work is, that they're not moving forward in any way. Remember, students are working at a particular level, and at that level, we move them forward at their readiness level, and then we get them to where they need to be. And then, of course, create your PowerPoints, read alouds, and or record mini lessons as outreach to students and parents. And I think that creating these little mini lessons, you can film yourself and put them up. And these are important, especially because since parents are working, they may not be able to get online with you. Some of you mentioned that participation is an issue. And yes, for some students, they cannot participate because they may be in a situation where they're being watched by other caregivers who may not be able to help them or have access to online. So it's important to put film these mini lessons if your school allows you to, and to put them up online so that parents then can access those when they're with their children. Parents are working during the day, and they may be able to do this on the weekend or in the evening when they get home. So now they're actually watching the lesson and how it's taught and what they should center on, and then work with their children. So our goal, of course, is to always help our students become independent learners. And one way, of course, of doing that is to help them to self-regulate. And one way we can do that is to provide them with some sort of checklist to help them do that. So if we think about self-assessment, There are different types of assessments, so you can do a Fist for 5 check during the class and at the end as an exit ticket. Expand on the Fist for 5 by having students identify what they need help with or what they do not understand. And this is important. The minute students start to begin to identify what they need help with, they're asking for assistance. They can create their own goals at this point. And then, of course, how we can teach them how to get there. And then students can upload or email their responses to you. So this is one activity. Another, a sample closing activity. This was done by one of my teachers, and it was at the end of a video of a Zoom session that she did with them. And she basically asked them the questions. How do you feel about your progress towards mastering the learning target? State how you can use what you learned today to improve your own writing. And so there are quite a few questions here. So you can modify this. You could have one question, you could have 2 questions, whatever it is that you feel you need for your students. And then these come from Engage New York. And of course, you can modify these to address the needs of your students. You can create a simple checklist. And this is for writing. And then I have another one here for argumentative writing. Again, you break it up as you see fit, how you think students should respond. And whatever those checklists are, they might just be 2 questions. It's up to you. But this is all about instruction, because today we're looking at instruction being in a variety of formats. So think about how you're providing that. Whether our instruction is online or blended, we must provide the right supports. Look at a student's IEP where you can find what works and what doesn't work. Look at the plot of part of the IEP. That tells you where the student is strongest in, and then build on that, use that to the student's advantage, of course, and then in order to work on what the child doesn't know. Take a look at the accommodation section, the management needs section. Those are the sections that tells you what works for students, whether students need more hands-on, whether they need visuals, whether they need highlighted keywords, whether they need a hands-on assistance. So take a look at that IP. That IP is important to instruction. So what type of supports when we're differentiating instruction? Well, you can provide graphic organizers and templates. Templates could be used for note-taking during an online session or in class. Oops, what happened? Here we go. Reading and writing websites and apps like Flow Vocabulary, but you have several that you are aware of. You can film a mini lesson and upload it to your online platform, audiobooks for students who have difficulty reading. And there are many that you can get. Also, you can create virtual anchor charts. So let's take a look at some of those anchor charts. So these are examples of anchor charts, and they work very well when students are writing, and they use those to then create a written piece. And you can create these online also. And these are the anchor charts that you can create in class or while you're online. So if you're teaching a lesson virtually and you're getting students' responses, you can create this on just paper, large paper. You can take a screenshot of it, you can put it up online, or you can create your own virtually. Online and in-class teacher supports. So we have the small group that we talked about, where students share their ideas in a smaller group. It's less threatening. It's closer supervision. You know exactly how each of those students are moving with the material. Assign paras to assist a leader group. So paras, if you do have paras can get online and provide some added support. If you're doing this with in class and your para is there with you, again, they can provide some support. One-on-one conferencing, whether it's online or in class, it's more intensive. Students who need more remediation, you can see the growth this way. And of course, opportunities to clarify any kind of misconceptions at this point. And then formative assessment. Again, we have to always assess our students as we're teaching them. So that's something that we always need to remember. So think about, once again, the do-nows, the exit slips, the questions and answers, the worksheets, the quizzes, the projects. All of this are things that we will use So, and in some cases, we need to collect data for students, for our students. You can create binders for students' work and collect students' work. So, and of course, teaching is a reflective profession. That is, we need to begin to think about what works and what doesn't work. So think about the glows and the grows. So these are some questions that we can ask ourselves. Is what I am doing working? Check in with students and parents. How can I engage and motivate my students further? How are the IEP goals incorporated into the lesson? Are we reinforcing those goals? Am I providing enough visuals for my students? Some of my students might even be ESL students who need those visuals. Is there enough enrichment for my fast finishers? What about the kids who are finished before everybody else? Just because they're students with special needs doesn't mean that you don't have students who are extremely bright. So think about those kids. How are you challenging those students in the classroom? And then what is not working? What should I do to make it work? These are the type of questions that we should be asking ourselves at the end of every lesson. So I'd like you to use the chat at this point, and I want you to think about, based on today's discussion, reflect on it, and what could you do differently in and out of the classroom and why? So I'll give you a few minutes to think about that. So we're just reflecting at this point. Think about maybe today, today is Tuesday. Think of today's lesson for those of you who are teaching. What worked for you today? What didn't work? What could you do differently if something did not work? What could you embed? So for me, I know that whenever I taught at the end of a lesson, I used to always ask this. And sometimes what I started off with was great. And then by the time the lesson ended, it didn't really turn out as well as I would have liked. So maybe I had to embed a few more visuals. Or maybe I needed to model a little bit more. So think about things like that. What about you? Joseph says here, I would likely try to use templates more for notes, and I will try to make some anchor posters to assist my students with their writing. Absolutely. Anchor charts work very well for in any subject area, actually, especially for writing, but also for any area, like even math. You know, you want to annotate exactly what students should be doing to solve a particular problem. So that's a great way to create that anchor chart. You can use the students' responses to create the anchor chart. Denise, add checklists more frequently. Yes, we want to help our students to self-regulate. We want students to become independent learners. And this is difficult because some of our students have great difficulty with executive functioning. So when we think about executive functioning, we're looking at setting goals, time management, we're looking at following schedules, we're looking at becoming more independent on their own. So that's a difficult area for our students. So creating these checklists and based on the students' levels, of course, it helps them to navigate that. So that hopefully one day they may not need to do that. I don't know about you, but I used to do lists all the time, and I check off what it is that I've done and what I need to do next. So this is something that is real and can be applied to real life, of course. Carissa, I have been trying to use more sites like Kahoot. I did Plickers for the first time last week, and they loved it. That's great. That's a great way to help our kids become more engaged. And that's something that we talked about earlier, engagement. So that's wonderful if that works. Wonderful. Eugene, I have learned many new engagement strategies I will try to use with my remote students. I could also do more check-ins. Check-ins are important. Our kids need to see us. They need to see that we're there, especially during this time that times are very difficult. They're accustomed to seeing us. When they see us, they feel more comfortable. I remember years ago when if I was giving a student a test and they saw me and I read to them, they felt a little bit more comfortable at that time. So yeah, when they see you, they feel better, especially with the assignment, because you may remind them of something that you taught. So the more they see you, the better. Matt, sometimes we get so determined to finish that we leave the kids behind. A bit more checklist, I guess. Yeah, absolutely. We do get determined sometimes, and we do forget where the students may struggle. So it might be important to also check in with them during the course of the lesson. You know, we prepare a lesson and we do this wonderful lesson plan, and then there we are when we're creating the lesson. And then if we're not checking in to make sure that the students are following along, we need to do assessments during the instruction. So once we do those formative assessments during instruction, then we can see whether students are with us or not. Because if they, at one point, if they struggle, then we need to do something different. We can't just continue. So yeah, absolutely. Sometimes a checklist might help, or fist for five, or thumbs up, thumbs down, or just asking students, where are you struggling? And sometimes those checklists do work. Let's see, Francesca, provide students with visuals, charts, as well as graphic organizers. Absolutely, visuals do work. A lot of our kids are visual learners. So yeah, visuals help a great deal. You can present a lesson with just a picture and then ask them to label the picture and tell us, what's in this picture? What do you see? What do you think it's about? You can ask them to infer based on the picture. What may have happened before? What is happening after? If you're doing a read aloud, you can do that too. Absolutely, nice job. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for your comments, very nice. So let's go on. So this is what you could do differently based on what we talked about. So now one more time, one more chat feature, okay? So I want you to think about a particular student, actually, that you have today. Based on your assessment of your student's work, consider the supports your students will need to access a lesson. We talk about universal design for learning, and we think about what works and what doesn't work for our students, how they access the curriculum, how they process that information, and then how they demonstrate and become, how they demonstrate their knowledge, and then of course to become independent of doing it. So think of one student right now, because before we were thinking of more like the class. Think about your assessment of that work. How will the students benefit from these varied supports? What kind of supports would you embed for that one particular student who's struggling the most? You can use the chat for this, of course. I'm sorry, I didn't say that. As we're coming to the end of our session, so let's do that. So, for example, for me, for some of our students, I remember we had students that had difficulty reading. So one of the things that I would do is I would read what was on the page for the student, and then ask the questions. And I found that if I chunked that information, the students did a lot better. Sometimes the students have that information, but they don't know how to put it down on paper. So by you reading it and then asking the questions and giving them an opportunity to respond, sometimes that helps a little bit better. I would provide more tutorials on using the various technologies. That's great. Absolutely. Ashley agrees, and so do I. Absolutely. That's important. Yeah, so chunking information. When you're doing a read aloud, if you're doing a read aloud, when you're reading a book with students, asking students to first identify what they see in the book. And then, of course, ask their point of view. I mean, what would you do in this situation if you're reading something about a particular situation? So make it relevant. Some of my teachers will bring in props to make the story come to life. Front load vocabulary. So that's important also, making sure that students understand vocabulary before they're actually reading. So front loading the vocab. Using games to help with a particular concept that you have taught. That helps to engage, and some of our students need that type of support with other students' help. Templates, of course, we mentioned before. Graphic organizers, of course, we mentioned. Some students need just a little bit more time, so it's okay to give them a little bit more time. Provide a step-by-step guide. Absolutely, that's very important for our kids. And maybe posting it on a smartboard and giving them also a handout itself with the step-by-step. So now if a person wants to move on their own pace, they can do that because they have it in their hand and they can work on their own. Or they can view it online, putting a book up online also, and highlighting key points on the reading. Those are important pieces also that you can do. Sometimes even covering certain aspects of what you're presenting, so you focus in on only one point, because there might be too much on a page. So covering certain parts, so students can just see what is important. Having students underline or circle parts of a question so that they can answer it. So think along those lines. So let's move on with this then. So one of the things I'd like you to think about is that teaching is a marathon. It's not a marathon. Excuse me. Teaching is not. Oh, I just forgot my thought. I'm sorry about that. So just keep in mind that you don't have to do everything at the same time, but just to choose one thing that might help. One person said that, Ashley said that I find that parents have even more questions than the students. So that would be awesome too. So many ideas. Absolutely. Getting in contact with parents is very important, and answering their questions is key to getting the students the support that they need, because our parents are the people who are helping us right now. So keep that in mind. Anything else? Anyone else? Does anyone have a question for me? So these are some supports that I have, some sites that you can view. You can go to Edutopia, understood.org, udlcenter.org, cas.org, education, alllearners.org, Learn at Edge. And these are just some sites that you can visit, and you can see some strategies that are used with special education students. Anyone have questions for me? Thank you for this great presentation. Oh, I'm glad that it was helpful. So thank you, because I know that this is hard work for everybody. I know that, especially at this time, students are having a difficult time, but so are we. And I know that you are, and you're putting yourself out there at this point. And I know that this is work that is very important to you as teachers. So thank you. Thank you. I'm glad it was informative.
Thank you very much, Vicenza Ferrantelli. That was a great presentation. We enjoy and we learn a lot from what you shared with us. And I want to thank you all our teachers and school leaders that participate in this session. You are our heroes. You working with these students with a special need is so challenging and hard. And keep in mind that our special education may have some special needs, but they have super abilities. So we have to work upon those abilities because they able to function well if we really build upon those super abilities that they have. Please scan the the QR code, and also I also put in the link for the evaluation form. It is very important for us to provide us your feedback because we always review it and we give feedback to our presenter. We always want to make it better to fulfill your needs. Uh, so please do so, and also visit our. Oh, if you want the CTLE credits, after you complete the evaluation form, you will be prompt to the CTLE credits. So you're able to provide that information to generate your certificate. Also, please visit our virtual booth for the PDRCs for the New York City, Upstate, and Staten Island. We're working together in collaboration, and you will see a lot of opportunities for you for further professional development. In the months of September and December, you're able to sign in there for future. Many of you want more strategies and technologies, how to provide instruction, and we will provide those sessions starting next week. So take opportunity, sign in. You will see some videos that we prepare for you in the product section. And thank you very much for your participation. And I hope I see you in the next session. You want to say some last words, Vincenzo?
Thank you very much, everyone. I really do appreciate your input. This was wonderful, and the fact that you shared what works with your colleagues. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Vincenza, and thank you, everyone, for really working with these children that we know are dear to our hearts and are just like anyone else, but need that special love and your dedication. So, Vincenza, you've given years of your service, and I know the teachers on this presentation are those who shared that dedication with you. So, this was wonderful to see such a great turnout. And we know that our children need you every day. So God bless for sure.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye bye. Thank you. Stop recording. Stop podcast.